Hello, thank you for joining us today on Uptime Logistics. I am your host, Doug Draper, and Uptime Logistics is powered by Cap Logistics. So please reach out to those guys at caplogistics.com if you have any transportation logistics needs. But the most important topic today, I'm super excited about it. We're going to be talking about renewable energy, specifically solar, and how that integrates with our daily lives and in our business world as well. So really, Denver is working to enable sustainable and resilient, climate safe future, really by collaborating with departments and other units of government and community partners, which is what we're going to talk about today. I didn't know this, but cities generate about 70% of global greenhouse gases. So this is a very relevant topic. And today, specifically, we're going to talk about programs and services that help make Denver one of the healthiest and most sustainable places to live. A little bit of background, some case studies, and maybe answer some of your questions. So I am certainly not the expert. We have one with us, and it's Jonathan Rodgers. He's with the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. That's a mouthful, my friend. Jonathan, welcome to our show. How are you doing?
Doug, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the conversation.
Good. Well, before we get into the meat of the show, we always like to learn about our guests and go from there. So tell us about yourself, kind of where you grew up, things you're passionate about, and then we'll jump into it. So let us know.
Sure thing. So I'm Jonathan Rodgers, but feel free to call me Johnny. I'm the Renewable Energy Specialist for the City and County of Denver in our Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Absolutely a mouthful, but effectively my role is to figure out and work with our partners on how do we transition Denver's energy systems to provide a reliable, affordable, and carbon-free future. As you mentioned, cities are a big source of climate emissions. It's going to take all of us working together to figure out how do we add solar, battery storage, how do we connect with electrified buildings and forms of transportation to better manage our energy resources and ensure that we can have sustainable power for generations to come. So before my role with the city, I really got into climate action work, doing a master's program focused on growing algae to make biofuels. So I was working in a lab, growing different strains of algae and figuring out how do we extract that oil to try to make more sustainable forms of transportation, or using that oil to make things like bioplastics that can help to offset, the various components in a barrel of petroleum. Mm-hmm. Now, when I came out of my master's program, I wasn't super optimistic about algae's potential for transportation, but I loved the idea of really getting into the weeds on trying to figure out, what are the technical solutions that we need for the climate crisis, and how do we make sure that they are scalable and economically viable. So I ended up working for a number of years for a consulting firm in Washington, D.C., working with the U.S. Department of Energy in their Bioenergy Technologies Office, their Office of Technology Transitions, where we tried to help bring cutting-edge tech from the national laboratories into the commercial space, and also began writing climate action plans for states and local governments as they tried to figure out, what their role was in the energy transition. I was in the right place at the right time in Denver to be able to take on the lead of this role in our climate office. The first person who's been tasked with really trying to come up with this coordinated strategy on how do we decarbonize our energy systems, both for our municipal facilities as well as for the broader community and the state and regional networks that we're a part of.
That's great. The pedigree and resume is impressive, Johnny. You and I didn't talk about that before. So I've just been working in warehouses most of my life. So I'm very impressed with everything. And I'm excited because you have a really genuine way of explaining some of the technology around solar and how it engages with community in a very simple way. And I think our audience will appreciate that. So let's kind of jump into it, man. What, whenever we talk about, terminology and things of that nature, sometimes I think it's good just to kind of start at the very beginning. And as simple as this question sounds, like talk about the different types of solar that are being utilized here in Colorado.
Absolutely. So when we think about, the utility system that we're a part of, there's a whole number of ways that, we can add power to it. and then a number of ways in which customers can access that power. In Denver, we're served by a monopoly utility, Xcel Energy. So they operate, the utility scale grid. They're bringing on large projects that get selected through their electric resource plan, which happens on, a 5-year cycle. But for customers like Denver and, other commercial businesses or residents who might have more ambitious clean energy goals, we want to figure out, how do we go farther faster? So that's where on-site solar can play a really big role. If you have space on your rooftop or, a parking lot that can handle covered parking, kind of solar canopies, or, maybe you're our Denver airport, for example, has a lot of land where we're able to build solar. All of that can connect back to your location, provide power through your electrical meter, and help to offset your utility costs. Now, not every customer has space on their roof or a nice big parking lot or, land adjacent to their facility. So need to think about, well, where else can I source that clean power from? Now in Colorado, I think it was back around 2013, the community solar program was formed. So that means that a community solar developer can apply to Xcel Energy to build a solar project somewhere on their distribution system, connect that power back to the grid. Every kilowatt hour that gets produced gets counted. An equivalent number of bill credits is available to that community solar project. And then what they can do is work with different subscribers, say, hey, we want to credit that power to your account. So if you don't have, space on your roof or, somewhere on your property, you can buy into a community solar garden, help support adding that clean power to the grid somewhere where it's going to make a positive impact, and receive that credit as a savings on your utility bill.
Gotcha. So on-site, the two types you just spoke about, on-site, that's really for powering my specific location, right? And then the community solar is more you buy into it and then they distribute, like you said, kind of credits and net metering back. That's kind of the difference between the two.
Yeah, and the way that we like to think about it with our programs is, we need as much clean power coming onto the grid as we can get, because we need the whole system to get closer to 100% renewable energy. But when you build it on site, you might be able to tap into some additional benefits of, okay, you're using that power now right where you're producing it. So becomes an ideal situation where maybe you want to couple it with battery storage. Maybe you have a electric vehicle charger where you want to take the power from your rooftop solar panels, put it into your vehicle. And the technology is actually getting to the point where you might be able to send power from your vehicle back into your building. So there's a number of resiliency benefits associated with on-site solar that you might not get with the off-site or community solar approach. But then there's, on the flip side, some benefits with community solar in terms of the ability to distribute those bill credits. And as I'll talk about in Denver's programs, being able to target them towards nonprofits or low-income households who could really benefit from those bill savings. So it's kind of killing two birds with one stone, adding clean power to the grid and providing targeted bill credits to help folks relieve their energy burden.
Yeah, that's great. So I know that folks around have seen solar on residential roofs, and some of our listeners may actually have solar panels on their roofs, but this is specific kind of to the commercial application. So a few ways that commercial customers can go solar and how can they share those benefits. You spoke about it just a second ago, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper. So if I'm a landlord and I own a building, or I rent my space and I may want to have a pitch to my landlord about sustainable options for energy, talk about the commercial building use. Let's start there.
Sure thing. So, if you're a commercial customer, you're interested in going solar, if you have the space at your site, I think on-site solar is a great option. The way that those customers are compensated is through something called net metering. So effectively, Xcel Energy or your utility is going to count how much power is flowing from the grid back to you as a customer. And then when your solar panels are producing, obviously you won't be pulling as much power from the grid. And there might be certain times of the day where you're actually sending power back to the grid. And when that happens, your utility meter will actually run in reverse. So at the end of the month, they're going to keep track of, okay, how much did you pull from us? How much did you send back? What's the net amount? And that's all that you're going to get charged for. So it's a great way to offset your utility costs. And at least the programs that are set up in Colorado in Xcel Energy service territory, it's a really low barrier for participation. Really, any customer can submit an application saying, hey, I'm moving forward with this solar project. There'll be a interconnection agreement that effectively just says, hey, we're going to make sure that when our solar project connects to the grid, it's going to play nicely. We're using standard equipment and utility approved technology. Really, any solar developer out there is going to make sure that you're connected safely and in a way that can meet the standards of the utility program. And you'll get a project up and running in no time and be able to start generating power and saving money for your facility in short order. Now, the community solar option is kind of hit or miss in terms of whether or not that capacity is available. There's only 1 or 2 annual offerings that Xcel Energy makes for new projects. And that capacity tends to go very quickly. So oftentimes there can be long waiting periods as to customers trying to match up with the developer and when is that project going to come online so they can start receiving bill credits. So it can be tricky to time it just right, but we've certainly seen robust participation from commercial customers in Colorado. We've also seen commercial property owners that might have extra land or space available lease that space to solar developers. In that way, they're helping to facilitate that addition of clean power to the grid. And they might get, a monthly or annual lease payment for their participation in the project. That's another great way for commercial customers to participate.
Yeah, I'd not thought about that if you're passionate about it and you have some land, that's another, what you just described is beneficial in the big picture that I wouldn't have thought of. So I'm going to go back to a question that popped up when we were talking about it, and I'm sure our listeners have the same thing. So I own a building, and I'm in the warehouse industry, and there's lots of buildings and big warehouses with flat roofs, and I want to engage, and I'm talking to developers, but this is a pretty substantial financial undertaking. How does that work? To say, hey, I'm going to give my roof, give you access to my roof to generate power, but this thing is going to cost $5 million, $10 million to get up and running. Talk about those different types of situations and who pays for it, what type of programs are out there. Because there may be folks that say, I'm all in, I just don't have the money to engage with an on-site project. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it depends on the scale of the project and who you really want to receive the benefits of that power. And fortunately, there's a number of different financing opportunities that are available. We've been seeing for our municipal facilities, something like a city rec center that might be 25,000 square feet for the building. Those projects will come in, a few $100,000. So it's certainly not a $5 million or a $10 million project. But of course, that still is a substantial upfront investment. And it might take, a number of years to pay off. I think a lot of businesses are used to saying, hey, we're not going to do anything unless it's, a 2 or 3 year simple payback. I think that's for each organization to make their own judgment, whether or not, a 10-year payback is, aligned with their goals. And knowing that, yes, the lifetime of the solar project could be 20 or 30 years. I'd say first step is make sure that your roof is in really good condition. If you're thinking about putting solar on the roof, we really only look at roofs that have been replaced within the last 2 to 3 years because we're trying to get the most out of this equipment. And the moment you need to pay someone to deinstall, repair the roof, and then reinstall your solar, you eat into a lot of your utility bill savings that you might expect over that project lifetime. We also definitely see the economics are a lot better if you do have the capital to make that upfront payment. The moment you start, taking out a loan from a third party and you're, paying back that loan with interest, again, that's another thing that eats into your long-term savings. But, you can certainly, we build economic models all the time to figure out, what is our tolerance in terms of payback? What do we need to be offsetting from our utility bill versus what, interest rate do we need to get for our loan in order for this to make sense? Or how much do we need to buy down to begin with? Mm-hmm. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act that was just signed into law is a huge opportunity for commercial building owners and nonprofits alike. Now, historically, there's been an investment tax credit that this year was at 26% and was going to step down to 22%. That's been reset to 30% tax credit for any investment in solar and battery storage. So right there, that can help dramatically with the economics of a solar project and bring you from, a 10-year payback to, maybe 5 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, with nonprofits and local governments, we're not, taxable entities. We're tax exempt. So that's not been something that we've been able to capture in our projects. But the Inflation Reduction Act has created a provision where those entities now qualify for a direct payment equivalent to the investment tax credit. So the details are still being worked out by the IRS or whoever it is that's going to kind of facilitate that program for the feds. But we're really excited. We had $20 million worth of solar projects lined up that are going to be installed over the next year on city and county of Denver property. Mm-hmm. Now, if we're able to capture 30% of that back, that just opens up a huge opportunity for us to continue to invest in our program and drive both our climate and equity goals forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to hear that you have a team that can do, a financial assessment, if you will. I can't remember the exact terminology you used a minute ago, but if I'm a owner of a building and I'm like, okay, this is going to cost X number of dollars, and immediately turn off and say that's not viable. But it sounds like, hey, talk about it, work through the options. There's other things out there and other programs. And the fact that you can walk through the individuals and the owners, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize that service was available. So that's great that you identified that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say definitely, reach out to, if you're a city and county of Denver building, reach out to us. We want to help people, with their clean energy goals, and nonprofits in particular. We have programs that the city funds specifically to help organizations go solar. We really focus on, who are the nonprofits that are providing critical services in their communities, places like, health clinics, affordable housing providers, food pantries, homeless shelters, locations where we really want to make sure that, in the event of a grid outage or some kind of catastrophe, you can continue to provide services. Mm-hmm. And, the 99% of the time that's not the case, we're just normal operations. How do we help you lower your utility bills, your operating costs, so that you can invest more in your services for the community that depends on you? Mm-hmm. So we have our Renewables and Resilience Incentive Program for nonprofits. We've got 10 contracts underway right now, one of which with an organization called Servicios de la Raza. They're the largest provider of health and human services for Latinos in the state of Colorado. And we're working with them on a 35 kilowatt solar project with 2 bidirectional EV chargers, 100% paid for by our office. And then we work with them over time to really, collect the data and evaluate, the benefits that this solar project, this, implementation of distributed energy resources provides to them as an organization, and try to strive for how do we ensure that they can continue to provide services no matter what happens on the system, and just really support them as an organization going forward. So if you're a nonprofit out there and that's, something that you feel like, hey, I provide critical services to my community, call us up, find my contact information. I'm sure, Doug, we can get it, in the show notes for people. We'll drop some links to our programs, but that's a great one that we encourage folks to take advantage of. And then if you're a commercial building and you're wondering, hey, how can I go solar and also give back to my community? We can certainly help with that. And there's a great example from Cap Logistics that I'd be happy to talk about if now's the right time for it.
Oh, for sure. We're having a great conversation. So yeah, I think examples help tell a story better than anything else. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. So, CAP reached out and said, hey, we want to do better and do good. And they did exactly what you're talking about. So yeah, why don't you elaborate what transpired, talk a little bit about the timing, funding, all that kind of good stuff. So perfect timing. Johnny, let her rip, man. Talk about the project with CAP.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is, like you said, exactly the type of example that, we get excited about when a commercial building approaches us and says, hey, we've got this big rooftop, we've got a warehouse, and, we've done the math, we can put solar on it and it's going to cover 150% of our needs. And now, they also recognize, CAP Logistics, this is exactly the type of example that we want to see folks setting. They also want to be a good neighbor, realizing that extra power, they could either not build it or, what do they do with it? How do they make the most productive use of that extra power? Mm-hmm. And so Colorado state law actually allows any excess solar power that's generated on a commercial or residential property can be donated to low-income households at the end of each year. There's an organization that's been set up, Energy Outreach Colorado. They're a kind of state-formed nonprofit that provides energy-related services for low-income households, things like bill payment assistance, weatherization services. They're helping when somebody's furnace breaks in the middle of the winter, they figure out how to keep those families warm. So they can work with an organization like CAP and say, all right, you're in the Swansea neighborhood. We have a number of families here who could really benefit from your excess power, and here's how we're going to make sure that it flows to them so that they don't get their power shut off because they are struggling to make a bill payment. Now you can help get them through what might be one of the most challenging moments of their lives, and be a really good neighbor. Mm-hmm. So we're helping the climate and we're helping our neighbors, and that's how really everybody's going to win in our energy transition. And hopefully more folks follow CAP's lead as they think about the solar configuration that makes the most sense for their facilities.
Mm-hmm. That's terrific. So one question that I threw out when you and I first met, and we were talking a little bit, and my initial, the answer, it makes a complete sense. So my question was, all right, so I have excess power and I'm passionate about this nonprofit, and I want my power to go from my building directly to that nonprofit because personal connections or whatever there may be, you're passionate about that organization. So we talked about that, and that's not really viable, but I guess explain to our audience, because I kind of already know the answer, but I thought it was a phenomenal answer and explanation. So I want this power to go specifically to this entity. Talk about if that's possible, and then talk about how the organization makes it happen. So
it depends on the program. Unfortunately, if it's a rooftop solar project connected to your utility meter, which is the easiest way to get solar on your building is through that kind of on-site behind the meter type project. And then anything you produce in excess, you're going to work with Energy Outreach Colorado to get it to low-income households specifically. Now, they may have some ability in the way that the law is written and the utility rules and regulations are set up to try to funnel that power to your nonprofit of choice. But really, they're going to look at, we've got households who are falling behind on utility bills, people who are, really struggling to make ends meet. And so it's kind of a need-based allocation. We're going to help those who really need it the most. And, I assume that they'll be able to work with entities to try to ensure that benefit stays local. Mm-hmm. So if you're, a local organization in a particular neighborhood and you want to make sure that benefit stays there, Energy Outreach Colorado is fantastic and they can help you do so. Mm-hmm. Now, the community solar program is where you can get much more specific and really identify the exact utility account that you want to receive power. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned earlier, it's a much more competitive program and very hard to actually get approval for projects. Mm-hmm. And we're very fortunate in Denver that we've received approval for 11 projects, the first 10 of which are a portfolio kind of around downtown, a number of parking lots for city rec centers, public high schools, 2 rooftops at the National Western Center and 2 ground-mounted trackers out at the Denver airport. And we formed a partnership with Denver Public Schools, saying, hey, we really want to make sure that we're maximizing the benefit of the power that we're donating back to the community. Can you help us out? Mm-hmm. So their Family and Community Engagement Office has about 1,000 families every year that approach them who are falling behind on utility bills, at risk of being disconnected from utility service. And, when you've got kids in school and you're trying to make ends meet, that's an existential crisis that I can't believe, and the amount of stress that might put on a family or on those students who might have their entire world turned upside down. So our program is going to be donating power to those families, identified by Denver Public Schools, the power donation facilitated by Energy Outreach Colorado, really helping folks keep the lights on. So we're really excited by that. And then our 11th project kind of takes things a step further, where we're actually partnering with Denver Botanic Gardens, building a 4-acre farm down at their Chatfield Farms location. So the 1.2 megawatt solar array going up on that farm will be able to provide power to over 250 Denver Public School families in need, in addition to meeting the entirety of the electrical load requirements at the Denver Botanic Gardens location. The Botanic Gardens folks are going to be operating that farm, donating food crops to local food pantries, creating job training programs. As they do so, they've got a great program for getting veterans, kind of hands in the dirt, reconnecting with the earth. They have about 190,000 visitors a year that come through that site. Mm-hmm. So we're really trying to use it as a public education opportunity, really highlighting what's it going to take for us to address food, energy, and water security. Early tests have shown that having the solar panels above the crops actually help with moisture retention in the soil. And as our summers have been getting hotter, the climate's getting more arid, can be pretty critical towards helping increase agricultural yields, and might be a model for the future that we really hope is scalable at a much bigger scale across the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are things that I wouldn't have even thought of. Our listeners may be like, I didn't even think that soil and helping with crop growth is a benefit of just generating power. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm going to shift gears for a second and talk about the future, right? I know we always kind of look 5 years out, 7 years out. I know that the technology has come a long way. So let's fast forward 5 years out. What are things looking like? And whether that's technology advancements, program advancements, and what things do we have to look forward to continue to provide these services that we're discussing?
Absolutely. I think, as the grid gets cleaner and we're adding more solar, more wind, more clean power, it's going to get really important to manage when that power is available. So I think we're going to start to see a shift in our programs towards that battery storage and thinking about, all right, not just how do we add more panels to the grid, but how do we do so in a way that's going to really maximize the resiliency benefit of, we want to put them in places where the grid can really benefit from having that power, next to locations that might double as emergency shelters or places like hospitals, other critical infrastructure where you want them to always have a reliable source of power. Mm-hmm. And then really trying to couple those systems with these storage technologies that continue to come down in cost and improve in performance, so that we can ensure that, when the sun shines during the day, we can use that power overnight as well. And likewise, as, the grid might have big influx of, wind capacity at some point, just how are we moving those resources around to really get us to that carbon-free future? So it's a challenge right now that, these resources are available, they're plentiful, but then there might be moments where, okay, the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing, and, Xcel has to turn on their gas power plants to preserve system reliability. Those are the kinds of challenges that we're going to have to overcome, and really where our attention is going to shift. But But along the way, we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate in the solutions, that the market signals that are sent and that compensate customers for producing their own power or storing their own power are enough to really encourage them to participate, and that the folks who are out there, the nonprofits who are really the pillars of their community, are supported in a number of ways.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, it totally makes sense with the storage, right? I mean, there's so much electric out there, and I know electric vehicles draws the attention in the media for sure, but you have heard many people say, what happens when the sun is not shining, or what happens when the wind is not blowing? So totally understand and makes sense about storage and managing that and making it more efficient in the future. So that's terrific. So just want to wind up and make sure that our listeners understand, if this has caught their attention or they want to learn more information about how can I, either as my company, I'm a commercial, and how can I learn more so I may be able to provide some value in the system and those that are in need. Talk to us. Give us the lowdown, the website, best way to contact, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think if you want to get in touch with us, check out our website, denvergov.org/solar. You'll find a number of resources there, as well as our contact information. Reach out to us with questions. We want to help people navigate. There's a number of different ways that folks can go solar. It can get overwhelming very quickly. Mm-hmm. And we want to be a resource to help you find the solution that makes the most sense for you, your business, your customers, and your community that you might be trying to create benefits for as well. Nonprofits, I mentioned we have a great program. There's still funding available right now. We're accepting applications. It's our Renewables and Resilience Incentive Program for nonprofits. And if you're interested in learning more about how Denver is using the community solar program to really put the community back in community solar, we'll have a number of we've got information on our website, as well as some upcoming press releases as we start to break ground on our first set of projects.
That's great. Thanks for that info. As I mentioned at the beginning, Johnny, the way you can explain, first of all, you're phenomenal at your job from just hearing you and the passion that you have, but the way you simplify all these programs and really help explain how it works, I genuinely appreciate that, and I know our listeners do as well. And I know the show is usually about logistics and supply chain, but this is an important topic, and it's really cool what Cap Logistics is doing for the benefit of the masses. So I can't thank you enough, Johnny, for being on the show today. I think our audience has learned quite a bit, and hopefully you'll get a barrage of phone calls and inquiries here in the foreseeable future.
I hope so. Really, again, thanks so much for having me on. And, I love talking about this stuff. I feel very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in, trying to help create these programs and really help facilitate, a successful energy transition for all of us. And, I think I've figured out 1,000 ways to explain all of this incorrectly and in extremely confusing terms. So hopefully I keep it getting better at getting the point across.
Yeah, you did just that. A+. And I'd also, as we wind up, I want to thank our listeners for joining us today on Uptime Logistics, powered by Cap Logistics. You can find more information about the show in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and visit Cap Logistics and learn more about the projects they're doing. So again, Johnny, really appreciate it. I know our listeners did as well, and look forward to speaking to the Uptime Logistics Nation in the future. Thanks again, everybody. Take care.